Court to the cloud. I'm really excited to hear about Carolina Gallardo Barker's story. I've heard of her, but I never heard
Great.
her story.
Well,
Yay,
this is cool.
Wendy.
This is the first story in the book, and there's 1,000 more to go. So this is great. First one. Anxiety/nightmare disorder, Carolina Gallardo Barker from Argentina. I was born in Argentina, Buenos Aires, in 1968. My parents divorced when I was 3 years old. I remember my bedroom vividly, the rest of the apartment, and a sense of high terror and insecurity. My parents used to fight loudly and very aggressively, many times ending with my mom getting beaten by my dad. We moved out secretly with one suitcase and nothing else. I became a child/adult protector, taking care of my depressed mom for the rest of my life. When President Perón died in 1974, his wife became president to a nation suffering from inflation, political violence, and labor unrest. In March 1976, she was deposed in an Air Force led coup, and a right wing military junta took power that brutally ruled Argentina until 1982. It was a time of bombs and shootings of anybody suspected of being a traitor to the nation. We moved in with my stepfather and lived in constant terror. People disappeared and were tortured. In our case, having a cousin who was part of the ERP, the People's Revolutionary Army, and my Jewish stepdad made us prime suspects. I felt the feeling of insecurity. That's when my nocturnal terrors started. A mix of terrible, very realistic nightmares, which would leave me waking up without being able to speak or shout for help. I couldn't fall back to sleep, terrorized about having these nightmares, but also that somebody would come in and get me from the darkness of the hallway. I was allowed to read, so I read anything and everything until the sun came up, and I would fall asleep exhausted for an hour or so before going to school. The many interrupted sleep nights led to being diagnosed with nocturnal terrors or nightmare disorder. Nobody wanted to give me medication. They thought a few talks would help. They didn't. I thought this was all my fault and I was being naughty. So I started to learn to cope as much as I could. My father, who I didn't see very often, was also very abusive, would return me to my mom's in the middle of the night saying I wouldn't stop crying and he didn't want me behaving like that. At 6 years old, I was sexually abused by the guy who would fix our TV, but I didn't say anything, as again, I thought it was all my fault, and I had been very, very naughty indeed. In fact, I didn't say anything until I was 28.
Ah,
Then I found the liquor cabinet. I would get up, and everybody else was asleep, and drink and try to fall asleep. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. I didn't want to lose control, as I needed to be alert in the case something happened. At 14, should I turn it over to somebody else?
At 14
ah,
years of age, after my granddad died, it was the end of the Malvinas Falklands War. The coup regime was losing power and the country at its worst. 1983 saw democracy reestablished, but the problem was that it didn't change the dictatorship style and corruption straight away. My school was more fascist than ever. I became a voice of change, heavily punished by authorities. I asked for help. So I went on to do 10 years of psychotherapy. It helped, but the pain of the treatment was very hard to stand. I discharged myself from what would have been a forever therapy. I was trying to cope, and some dodgy doctors who would make a good living out of people's misery were happy to prescribe me amphetamines, Valium, and a whole concoction, which was useful but very detrimental. At 28, I spent 3 days on my own on the balcony, trying to get enough courage to jump. I innocently said to my mom, I'm trying, but I can't jump. I need the courage to jump. Please help me. I
ah.
started having panic attacks and not knowing what they were. My, lew- my level of panic and anxiety was major. I couldn't sleep, hold a job, or have any healthy relationships. I felt alone, broken, and terribly lonely, especially as if it was my fault. And I didn't know how to change. Another 4 years of intense psychotherapy, followed by antipsychotic and anxiety medication. I met my husband, and we moved to England after another political and economically disastrous Argentinian period. I was 32 and the first time quit all my medications cold. cold turkey. I was away from my family. It was a different language, and everything was working in the opposite direction, literally. I did not manage well and was totally dependent on my husband. I was diagnosed with insomnia, depression, anxiety, and seasonal affective disorder. The panic attacks would last pretty much all day. Antidepressants and psychotropics were prescribed again. I learned to survive as I could. I tried homeopathy, herbalism, DNRs, hypnosis, DNL, you name it, I tried it. At 44, seeking an answer, I went to a course I didn't know what was about the three principles. I got very upset with the leader, Ian Watson, who I really admired. I thought he was having a mental breakdown. I didn't see it until I started seeing it. It was too simple and too stupid to be true. Yet my life started to change, and I got curious. I went to another training 4 months later, and I saw it. I started sleeping and decided to divorce the blink of an eye. My father was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and yet I was coping for the first time in my life. Panic attacks were less common, and I knew it was okay. I heard Dr. Bill Pettit say, "You are not broken. You have never been, and you will never be. Nothing lacking, nothing needed. You are sitting in perfect mental health." It hit me like a ton of bricks. I cried with relief for days. Something had shifted. I knew more than I knew my name. I was fine, that it wasn't my fault. I had innocently created a hellish life I didn't need to live in anymore. I met my now partner of 10 years, Wayne, who has cerebral palsy, and deeply fell in love with him. He heard something in what I was saying, although he could never remember the words I said. The next day, he was out of his current misery. He got curious. "What did you say to me? What did you do?" It was the start of many conversations in a relationship I never knew could be possible. I started living the most amazing life, and no medications anymore. It hasn't always been easy. I lost 2 sister-in-laws and 1 stepsister to cancer, followed by my dad's suicide, shooting himself. We almost lost my other and sister-in-law to early labor and the baby, all in a very small amount of time. I had COVID that turned into chronic fatigue, which hit me very hard, but I coped. I have bought a bike. I am enjoying life, getting better every day. Wayne and I keep feeling that fresh state of caring, loving connection after a decade of hard events together. I have become incredibly more grounded and helpful to other people too. I have co-started a Spanish-speaking community to help this understanding spread across the world. This is my life and my passion. This is the very reason I am writing and sharing this with you today. Regardless of any diagnosis, this understanding has kept me alive, living the best life I could ever imagined. I hope it helps you too.
Wow. What a beginning.
Wow. Yeah.
Now I can't, I have to find time to jump on YouTube and Google Carolina Gallardo Barker. I'll put it in the YouTube comment explanation. Wow. Did you know that she had this experience? Wendy, did you know?
I don't know her at all.
Oh, yeah. I've seen the name through the Three Principles community, but what an amazing story. Thank you so much, Wendy, for recommending that we do this together. This is not the kind of thing that I could read alone. I would just be calling you to talk to you about it. Woo. Is it okay with all of you if I send this to people who I think would be very touched and
Fine
could
by
hear
me.
something? Yeah,
Sure.
good,
Yes.
Elaine.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, okay. Whoa, we need a little breather after that before launching into the next one, right? You know what? I'm going to stop this and then I'll start it up again. Yeah. This is just so powerful. It's a stand.